Who's on the hot seat? Doctors are kept honest by their medical organizations, who propose and codify state-of-the-art clinical guidelines. But doctors are also kept honest by their patients, as many of them won't improve by following those same guidelines. Astute clinicians are pattern recognizers. They know when they're seeing the same thing time and again. They know something's up. They might not know what it is exactly, but they know they need to change something. One such pattern recognizer was Robert Atkins, who rethought human nutrition and metabolism, realized refined carbohydrates were hurting himself and his patients, and wrote a book to explain his change in practice. Some called him a huckster and charlatan. Some called him dangerous. But he was listening to what his patients were telling him, and ultimately he was proved right. A most unseemly aspect of medicine is when professionals in the community turn such pattern recognizers into criminals for daring to think outside the box. 3 physicians, Dr. Tim Noakes in South Africa, Dr. Evelyn Bourdois in Quebec, and Dr. Gary Fetka in Australia, have been formally investigated by their country's respective medical boards for promoting low-carbohydrate lifestyle advice. They're charged with giving medical advice on the radio or in lectures that could mislead the public on low-carb, high-fat, LCHF, ketogenic diets. In each case, the charges were brought to the medical board by the dietetics board of each country, without evidence in support of the claims, and without any alleged victim of that dangerous medical advice coming forward. Noakes was referred to his medical governing board by Johannesburg dietitian Claire Gissling Stridham, president of the Association for Dietetics in South Africa, due to a single tweet he made to a breastfeeding mother. In it, he said that good first foods for infant weaning are LCHF. Thus, for infants, he was suggesting meat, fish, chicken, eggs, dairy, and vegetables. The ADSA views LCHF diets as fashionable, and instead supports orthodox low-fat, high-carb diets, for example, rice, cereal, strained fruits. Noakes went on trial twice to have his medical license revoked, and despite being exonerated with testimony from international experts on metabolism and nutrition, has suffered through waves of negative publicity and censure. Bourdois' investigation by Quebec's medical board is ongoing. The charges against her advocating a LCHF diet were levied by prominent dietitians who wrote an opinion piece in the Le Soleil newspaper. The letter's first signatory is Caroline Dubois, Regional Director of the Dietitians of Canada, DOC, for Quebec. Although Dubois is careful to stress that neither she nor the DOC lodged the complaints against Bourdois, she wouldn't say whether the nutritionists who complained are DOC members. The DOC website says that dietitian and nutritionist are protected titles in Quebec. Just as with other sister dietitian associations globally, DOC is heavily conflicted. Like some medical societies, they accept sponsorship money from big food, big sugar, big soft drinks, with Coca-Cola driving from the front, and big pharma. Many of their members have industry links. Last year, over 700 doctors, dietitians, and nutritionists signed a letter to their government in support of Bourdois, calling for radical reform of nutrition guidelines to include low-carb, healthy natural fat diets. Bourdois herself posted a hard-hitting response to Dubois' letter in an article in the HuffPost that 80 other Canadian doctors signed. The headline, "Low carb, high fat is what we physicians eat. You should too." Dr. Bourdois has not yet been exonerated. Fetke, an orthopedic surgeon by training, developed an aggressive pituitary tumor requiring surgery, chemotherapy, and radiotherapy, and through his own research has been able to stave off its progression by adopting an extremely low-carbohydrate, high-fat diet, known universally as the ketogenic diet. See Chapter 12. This diet is now in trial around the world at notable research institutions such as Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York and MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, to starve the tumor and reverse its growth. Fetke, as a caregiver, prefers not to have to amputate limbs from diabetic patients as a consequence of their condition. So he tells his patients that a simple dietary change can save both life and limb. For informing his diabetic patients to reduce their sugar intake, Fetke was stripped of his ability to provide nutritional counseling or medical management of his patients. Fetke still doesn't know the names of the persons who reported him to the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, AHPRA, but he does know that the complainants are members of the Dietitians Association of Australia, DAA. They accused him of inappropriately reversing a patient's diabetes. Really? The DAA has made its opposition to LCHF and ketogenic diets well known, and Opera slapped a lifetime ban on Fetka for his attempts to try to save diabetic patients' limbs from being sawed off and their lives from being snuffed out. The good news is that Dr. Fetka, with help from the international medical community, finally won his appeal in 2018. It's clear that sugar and processed food drive obesity, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and fatty liver disease. See Chapter 2. And there's emerging data that processed food is responsible for cancer and dementia as well. It's also clear that low-carbohydrate diets haven't worsened this trend, and in some cases have reversed these diseases. Yet the medical establishment refuses to be re-educated and instead prosecutes the re-educators.